The truth about BARF has never been clearer. Behind the myths and controversies, there's a growing consensus among veterinarians and nutritionists. When done with guidance, raw food is one of the most natural and safe ways to nourish dogs and cats. In this video, we'll reveal what experts really think about the BARF diet, debunk the biggest myths, and show how modern science is teaming up with ancient biology to restore health and longevity to our pets. For years, the BARF diet, an acronym for biologically appropriate raw food, was treated with suspicion. While thousands of owners around the world reported visible improvements in the health of their dogs and cats, much of the veterinary community maintained a cautious stance, asking for more scientific evidence before endorsing the practice. But what, after all, is myth and what is true about raw food? And what do veterinarians who have studied the subject actually say? The discussion about BARF began to gain momentum in the United States in the early 2000s, when owners began to question the high degree of processing of commercial feed. Many realized that their animals suffered from constant allergies, itching, skin inflammation, and obesity, and sought more natural alternatives. The idea behind the BARF diet is simple. Feed dogs and cats similar to what they would eat in the wild: raw meat, bones, offal, and vegetables, balancing nutrients in proportion to the needs of each species. But this simplicity soon turned into controversy. Traditional veterinarians have warned about the risk of contamination by bacteria, such as Salmonella and E. coli, as well as possible nutritional imbalances when the diet is not formulated by a qualified professional. On the other hand, veterinary nutritionists who have studied the subject in depth have found that many of the myths surrounding BARF come from generalizations and incorrect comparisons with poorly formulated diets. The problem, in most cases, is not raw food. It is the lack of information and proper guidance. To understand what veterinarians really say, you must first debunk the myths circulating on social media. One of the most common is the myth that raw meat is bad for you and causes disease. In fact, studies conducted by American and European universities have shown that healthy dogs have a digestive system capable of dealing with bacteria present in raw food, thanks to the acidic environment of the stomach and the intestinal microbiota adapted to the digestion of animal proteins. This does not mean, of course, that any raw meat is safe. The handling, hygiene, and storage process needs to follow strict protocols, just like in the preparation of human food. Another recurring myth is that the BARF diet is not balanced and causes deficiencies. This is a partially true argument. Yes, there are risks when the owner tries to improvise without the support of a veterinary nutritionist. But ultra-processed commercial diets can also generate imbalances, especially when they contain artificial additives and low-quality flours. The secret lies in the proper formulation, and at this point, veterinarians specializing in animal nutrition say that a well-planned raw diet with the correct proportions of lean meats, fleshy bones, viscera, and vegetables provides all the nutrients that the animal's body needs. The issue of food safety is also often used to discredit BARF. It is true that there are cases of contamination, but these episodes usually involve incorrect handling, expired meats, or inadequate storage conditions. When the diet is prepared hygienically, using fresh meats from reliable suppliers and stored under constant refrigeration, the risk of contamination is similar to that of human food. Many veterinarians who once condemned the diet now recognize that the application of good sanitary practices and proper freezing drastically reduce these risks. A point that also generates confusion is the role of raw bones. Some owners believe that any bone will do, which is a serious mistake. Specialized veterinarians explain that only raw, fleshy bones, such as those of chicken, duck, or lamb, are safe as long as they are in adequate proportions. Cooked bones should never be offered, as they become brittle and can cause perforations. BARF recommends the use of raw bones precisely because they maintain a flexible structure and offer natural calcium, in addition to promoting dental cleaning and strengthening of the jaw. Among the benefits most reported by veterinarians who accompany animals fed with BARF are improved digestion, smaller and less odorous stools, shinier coat, stable energy, and even reversal of chronic allergies. These results are observed mainly when the transition is made with professional monitoring and respecting the adaptation time of the animal's body. But there is one factor that few comment on. BARF is not a magic diet. It requires commitment, knowledge, and constancy. The tutor needs to understand that it is not about throwing meat in the pot, but about offering a precise combination of ingredients with ideal proportions of protein, fat, calcium, phosphorus, vitamins, and fiber. For this reason, veterinarians who defend the method insist BARF should always be planned as an individualized menu, not a universal recipe. In the United States, integrative veterinary clinics have been adopting BARF as part of preventive health protocols, especially for animals with food allergies and autoimmune diseases. The approach includes the use of natural probiotics, fish oils, and mineral supplements, ensuring that the animal's immune system remains balanced even with the consumption of raw foods. This is where modern science and natural instinct meet, and the result has surprised even the most skeptical professionals. What was once considered a taboo is now beginning to gain scientific recognition. International veterinary journals have already published studies showing the reduction of intestinal inflammation and improved immunity in dogs fed balanced raw diets. There is still debate, of course, and there always will be, because animal nutrition is an ever-evolving field. But the consensus among the most up-to-date professionals is clear. There is no single correct way to feed an animal. There is, yes, the responsibility to understand what is being offered and the effects of this on the animal's body. The BARF revolution is not just about feeding, it is also cultural. She invites tutors and veterinarians to rethink the way they see pets, not as consumers of industrialized food, but as living beings with real biological needs. In the end, debunking myths is more than correcting misinformation. It is giving back to animals what industrialization has taken away from them, the right to eat in a natural and balanced way. Among the most persistent myths about raw natural food, perhaps the most common is that there is no scientific backing for BARF. This idea, still repeated in some more conservative veterinary circles, began to be dismantled as European and American universities began to investigate the effects of this diet in a systematic way. Research conducted at the University of Helsinki, for example, followed hundreds of dogs over the course of years and observed significant reductions in gastrointestinal and dermatological diseases in animals fed balanced raw diets. Similar results have been published by institutions in Germany, Denmark, and the United States, demonstrating that nutritional balance and microbiological control are more determinant for health than whether the food is raw or cooked. These studies paved the way for a new posture within veterinary medicine, the integration between science and natural practice. Veterinarians who were previously skeptical have started to apply hybrid protocols, combining BARF and clinical supplementation in cases of kidney failure, arthritis, and obesity. The objective is only one: to offer the animal's body what is biologically compatible with its species, respecting individual variations. This shift in mindset started with data, but it was consolidated in the observation of everyday life, in the behavior, energy, and vitality of dogs and cats that went through the transition. Another widespread myth is that BARF is dangerous because it contains bacteria. The mistake here is to ignore that animals have completely different digestive systems than humans. The stomach of a healthy dog has an extremely acidic pH, capable of eliminating pathogenic bacteria that would affect humans. In addition, dogs have a much faster intestinal transit time, which drastically reduces the chances of bacterial proliferation. Expert veterinarians remember that, even in commercial diets, the microbiological risk is not non-existent. Dry products can also be contaminated during the industrial process. The difference is that in BARF, the tutor controls the origin and handling of the meat, ensuring that the food is fresh, clean, and handled safely. Many professionals still worry about human exposure to pathogens, especially in homes with young children or immunosuppressed people. At this point, the recommendations are clear: strict hygiene, separate utensils for the preparation of pet meals, and proper freezing of meat. Freezing for at least 72 hours significantly reduces the bacterial load, making the food safe for both the animal and the humans who live with it. Science is not the enemy of the raw diet. Rather, it provides the tools to make it safer and more efficient. Another myth that often generates debate is that BARF makes the dog aggressive. The origin of this rumor goes back to a confusion between behavior and sensory stimulation. Eating raw meat awakens in the animal a more natural eating instinct, but not aggressive behavior. Behavioral studies conducted by ethologists at the University of Melbourne have shown that dogs fed raw diets do not show increased aggression, but rather attention and food satisfaction. The act of chewing on bones and fibrous tissues releases endorphins, reduces stress, and improves mental health. Therefore, aggression does not come from the flesh, but from environmental and emotional factors, such as boredom, lack of exercise, and isolation. The perception of danger around BARF is also fueled by the commercial feed industry, which invests billions annually in advertising campaigns aimed at reinforcing the idea that natural food is homemade and risky. Big brands fund research that compares poorly balanced raw diets with high-quality feeds, skewing the comparison from the start. Independent veterinarians and clinical nutritionists warn of this conflict of interest. True science must evaluate correctly formulated protocols, not improvised versions. Another oft-cited myth is that it's too expensive to feed BARF. The truth is that, in many cases, the cost is similar or even lower than that of a super premium food. The tutor who learns to buy meat and offal in bulk, take advantage of seasonal cuts and freeze portions correctly, can maintain a balanced diet at an affordable cost. In addition, when considering the savings on veterinary consultations and medications to treat allergies, obesity, and chronic diseases, BARF tends to pay for itself over time. Veterinarians report significant reductions in the number of cases of dermatitis and gastritis in animals that have migrated to the natural, which reduces costs and increases longevity. Another point that needs to be demystified is the myth that BARF is not suitable for elderly dogs or puppies. Raw food is adaptable for all stages of life, as long as it is adjusted correctly. For puppies, the ratios of calcium and phosphorus need to be precisely controlled. For senior dogs, proteins must be highly digestible, low in fat, and supported by omegas and chondroprotectors. That's why the monitoring of a veterinary nutritionist is indispensable. He calculates each ingredient based on the animal's weight, age, physical condition, and even exercise routine. The success of BARF depends on personalization. And this is precisely the difference between following fashions and understanding biology. A tutor who copies generic recipes from the internet can end up harming the animal without realizing it. On the other hand, those who seek information from reliable sources and work together with a veterinarian will have a specific meal plan, tested and adjusted over time. It is this balance between science and nature that is transforming the way the world views animal nutrition. Today, in several clinics in the United States, it is common to see owners arriving with blood tests and reports of their pet's gut microbiome. Specialized veterinarians cross-reference this data with the BARF menus and adjust micronutrients according to the results. This scientific approach dismantles the alternative image of the raw diet and places it at the center of modern preventive medicine. What was once considered radical is now recognized as one of the most powerful tools for improving the quality of life for animals. The truth, therefore, is that BARF is not dangerous. Ignorance is. Eating consciously and responsibly is what separates risk from full health. Behind the myths and debates about the BARF diet is a central point that every owner needs to understand. The biology of dogs and cats has not changed. We are the ones who change the way we feed them. When a veterinary nutritionist analyzes the body of a healthy dog fed raw, balanced foods, he observes something simple. The body responds in a more natural way, as if recognizing what it receives. This response is reflected in the digestive system, skin, teeth, disposition, and even behavior. The canine digestive system, for example, is short and extremely efficient at digesting animal proteins and fats. It is a direct inheritance from their wild ancestors. The acidity of the stomach is so intense that it acts as a natural barrier against harmful microorganisms. When a dog consumes highly processed foods, this acidic environment changes, compromising nutrient absorption and making room for inflammation and intestinal dysbiosis. BARF gives back to the body what was lost by industrialization, a physiological environment compatible with its facultative, carnivorous nature. Veterinarians who have been following dogs fed with natural diets for years report remarkable transformations. Animals that previously suffered from chronic flatulence, bulky and smelly feces, now have regular digestion and small dry excretions without a strong odor. This happens because the body makes better use of nutrients without the residues of refined carbohydrates and chemical additives from industrial feed. In addition, breath improves, tartar decreases, and the animal stays hydrated naturally, a direct reflection of the high humidity present in raw food. But this is where one of the most dangerous myths comes in, that all raw meat will do. Many well-meaning owners believe that it is enough to give fresh meat and bones, but animal nutrition is much more complex. A well-structured BARF menu follows precise proportions, about 70% muscle meat, 10% fleshy bones, 10% viscera, and the rest vegetables and natural supplements, such as fish oil and seaweed. This combination ensures the balance of calcium, phosphorus, iron, zinc, B vitamins, and antioxidants. Specialized veterinarians reinforce that the most common mistake is to neglect the role of the viscera, especially the liver and heart. The liver is a natural source of vitamin A, iron, and copper, while the heart provides taurine, which is essential for heart health, especially in cats. The absence of these elements for long periods can generate serious deficiencies, even in apparently rich diets. That is why BARF requires technical knowledge. Natural food is powerful, but when done without guidance, it can become dangerous. Another point that many owners ignore is the importance of the fatty acid profile. The balance between omega-3 and omega-6 is essential to prevent inflammation. While chicken and pork are rich in omega-6, it is omega-3 that acts as a natural anti-inflammatory. Veterinarians recommend regular use of wild salmon oil, krill oil, or even sardine oil to balance this relationship. This reduces allergies, improves cognitive function, and keeps the coat shiny. In the United States, more and more veterinary nutrition clinics are adopting personalized analyses for each patient. An example is the use of fecal microbiome tests, which identify the bacterial balance of the intestine. From this data, veterinarians adjust the BARF menu, including specific fibers and natural probiotics, such as kefir and fermented yogurt, to strengthen the intestinal flora. This scientific approach has been debunking the myth that BARF is empirical or without a technical basis. On the contrary, the digestive biology of animals has never been studied so much as now. A particularly strong myth among beginner tutors is that BARF is not practical. It is true that it requires more dedication than opening a package of food, but the routine becomes simple with organization. Veterinarians recommend preparing weekly servings in batches, weighing each ingredient and storing it in frozen jars. Over time, the tutor gains agility and savings. Specialized platforms and pet nutrition companies already offer ready-made menus, balanced by professionals, delivered frozen and with a food safety seal. Another myth that needs to be dispelled is that apartment animals don't need BARF. The urban environment may be modern, but the animal's organism remains the same. Living in an apartment does not change your biological need. What changes is the caloric expenditure, which must be considered when calculating the amount of food. Less active dogs need adjusted portions, not ultra-processed foods. The raw diet, when correctly dosed, offers clean and constant energy without causing glycemic spikes. Veterinarians also highlight the relationship between BARF and longevity. Longitudinal studies indicate that dogs fed natural diets tend to live longer, with a lower incidence of cancer, kidney problems, and metabolic diseases. Part of this advantage is due to the absence of synthetic preservatives and fast-fermenting carbohydrates. In addition, chewing on raw bones and meats stimulates salivary flow, reducing plaque buildup, a leading cause of systemic inflammation and heart disease in senior dogs. The psychological factor is also fundamental. Animals fed BARF demonstrate greater food satisfaction, expend energy chewing and exploring the food, which reduces destructive behaviors and anxiety. In behavioral clinics, it is common for veterinarians to observe that dogs on a raw diet are calmer and more focused, especially when food is combined with environmental enrichment. Finally, there's a truth that debunks all myths. BARF is not a trend. It is a return to what is natural. When veterinarians talk about raw food, they are not promoting fashion or ideology, but applied biology. The goal is not to convince, but to raise awareness. The informed tutor does not choose BARF by emotion, but by logic. He understands that balance and security go hand in hand, and that a well-nourished body is the best defense against disease. Science does not stop confirming what nature already knew. And veterinarians who dedicate their careers to animal nutrition know this better than anyone. Every form of life flourishes when it is fed what it was born to digest. Myths about BARF continue to circulate, in part because this change in pet nutrition represents something much bigger than a simple diet change. It defies decades of marketing and deep-rooted habits. When a veterinarian defends a natural diet, he is questioning not only the pet industry, but also a logic of convenience that has overtaken biology. The transition to BARF is, above all, a decision of conscience, and that is why it causes so much resistance. But among professionals who have immersed themselves in the science of natural nutrition, the conclusion is unanimous. The results speak for themselves. In clinics in the United States and Europe, more and more case studies demonstrate reversals of conditions previously considered chronic: severe food allergies, gastritis, obesity, and even joint inflammation. The basis of these transformations lies in the restoration of the intestinal microbiota, the control of inflammation, and the elimination of ultra-processed ingredients that overload the liver and kidneys. When a dog starts feeding on balanced raw food, the body responds from the inside out. Breath improves, tartar disappears without the need for anesthesia, hair regains shine and density, stools become small and dry, body odor practically disappears, and energy stabilizes. Veterinarians describe this process as a metabolic reprogramming, in which the body goes back to operating as it should. Another common myth is that BARF is just an internet fad. Nothing could be further from the truth. The first research on raw food began in the 1980s, with Australian veterinarian Ian Billinghurst considered the father of the BARF movement. Since then, the method has evolved, gained nutritional standardization, and is now studied in universities around the world. What was once seen as a home practice is now part of clinical protocols for preventive nutrition. Veterinarians who already apply BARF safely highlight that the future of pet food lies in personalization. Each animal has a specific metabolism, routine, and genetics, and the success of any diet depends on respecting these differences. That is why the role of the tutor has changed. He's no longer just a consumer and has become an active part of the animal's health. Monitoring the preparation, understanding the proportions, observing reactions, and recording progress is part of the process. But there is something even more important. The dialogue between science and nature needs to be constant. The most experienced professionals do not reject the use of supplements, laboratory analyses, or blood tests. On the contrary, they use these tools to fine-tune the natural menu. The union between scientific knowledge and practical observation is what makes BARF a complete and safe diet. Another crucial point is the impact of this diet on the mental health of pets. The act of chewing raw meat and bones is not only physical, It is also emotional. It releases dopamine and serotonin, reducing anxiety and hyperactivity. It is a form of behavioral nutrition, which rescues the animal's instinctive relationship with food. Dogs and cats that previously ate apathetically start to show pleasure and involvement during meals. This natural stimulation is one of the reasons why BARF improves not only health, but also the bond between owner and animal. Behavioral veterinarians report that in many cases, the raw diet aids in the rehabilitation of anxious and reactive dogs. Increased satiety, prolonged chewing, and the release of endorphins create a cycle of balance that no dry food can replicate. In the United States, cutting-edge integrative clinics already combine BARF with supportive therapies such as acupuncture, herbal medicine, and physical rehabilitation. This holistic view has been transforming the concept of pet well-being, no longer just the absence of disease, and now means full health, energy, longevity, and balanced behavior. The veterinarians who follow this evolution are unanimous in stating that BARF is much more than a menu. It is a return to the logic of nature. They note that when the animal's body is nourished in a biological and respectful way, all functions harmonize. Metabolism works efficiently, immunity is strengthened, aging slows down. Ultimately, BARF isn't about fads or controversies. It's about responsibility. It's about understanding that each meal has healing or imbalance power. When the choice is conscious, it becomes a powerful tool for transformation. Today, the question that moves the most attentive tutors is no longer, does BARF work? But why did it take us so long to return to what has always been natural? The veterinarians who debunk the myths already know the answer, because the simplest path is often the one that requires the most courage. The courage to trust nature again,